let's set up the story for people. So yeah, it's a family story, and you play the son.
Yeah, the main characters are a father and a son. The father's played by Lance Henriksen, who's a legendary actor who's been in
great actor,
280 movies, most of them genre movies, sci-fi, horror, so forth. Some that are just unclassifiable, but he's always riveting. There's always something believable about what he does. He's committed as an artist. He's really good, and he has this great presence and so forth. He plays the patriarch, and he is someone who's at the early stages of dementia. He's a man who's a farmer who's been living for decades by himself, and who has become more isolated and more bitter in the course of his life, in part because, of his nature and his upbringing, but things that have happened in his life that he's never gotten over, like that his wife left him with her kids, because of his sort of inflexible attitude about certain things. And I am one of those kids now grown up. I'm his son. And this man who lives alone on this farm has agreed to come to California at the beginning of the story, where
you live.
Yeah, where I live, and where my sister lives, who's played by Laura Linney, fabulous actress.
Right,
does a great job as Sarah. My name is John in the story, and Willis, our father, has agreed to come out. So I go get him, bring him from snowy northern New York State out to Southern California, and he's agreed. Yeah, it's time. We're going to find a place for you to live near us, and where things will be more manageable. And, even though he doesn't want to talk about it or acknowledge the fact that he's slipping, there's a part of him that's, for a moment in time, he thinks about it. But then as soon as he gets there, he's like, nah, I don't want to do this. And so he doesn't really, it's a very difficult relationship. Eventually, he just refuses to make that accommodation. He would rather be alone and bitter. And all that. And what the movie explores to some degree, or a great degree, is this problem of communication, this, I guess, other pandemic that we're going through as a society right now. And it's not a movie that gives you answers or tells you what to do or espouses any ideology. I don't like stories that tell you what to think or feel and give you answers. I like stories that are interesting enough that they pose questions that you're interested in answering for yourself. And one of the main questions in Falling is, are there people that you can't communicate with? Are there people that don't deserve to be communicated with just because they're so awful, because they're racist, because they're misogynist, because they're homophobic, because they're all these things that Willis shows himself to be, because they're bitter and nasty and they don't treat you with respect. And, it's easier to condemn someone and dismiss them if you don't get along with them. It's certainly easier when you're younger and if you've had no experience taking care of an old person in your family or a friend. It's not as simple. Well, I wouldn't put up with that shit. I'm not going to talk to him. It's like, or her. It's not always that simple. Life is complicated. And in this story, the character I play has made a decision. And he says so in a scene about a third of the way through the movie, where the dad has just gone on a tirade. He's slipping in and out of that dementia, because it's late in the day one day. And he's insulting him and he's saying, homophobic things. So the character I play is in a relationship. He's married to a man. They have an adopted daughter. And this is just like unthinkable for the father and has been for a long time. So it's just one of the elements that they disagree with about or at odds about. And he's insulting him and he's insulting the memory of John's mother. He's just throwing the book at him in terms of offensive speech and language, and attitude. And John says to him at one point, look, Dad, you can insult me all you want, but I've made a decision. I made myself a promise that I am not going to get into another big blowout with you because I want to help you. And John knows that this old man, who happens to be his father, who's a kind of a hateful, bitter old man, he does need help mentally and physically. And he also knows that he's not going to accept help from anybody. The only person that even has the slightest chance to help him, to accept help from, is John. the character, I'm playing. And so he's decided, okay, if I want to help this guy, I can't do what I've done in the past all through my life with my father, which is give as good as I get and have these blowouts, and then we don't talk for months or years, and then we try again and so forth. No, now it's too late. Now I need to help him. And if I want to help him, the only way I'm going to be able to do it is I'm going to have to take a lot of crap. And as a narrative thing in the story, it's like you're tensing. It's like if it was a bow and arrow, you're pulling back the string, pulling it back impossibly far. And either that the bow is going to break, or the string's going to snap, something's going to happen. And it does. And John's just a human being. And eventually this thing, which he's making a conscious, difficult effort to like put up with a lot of crap, especially the way my father talks about my mother, who's a key figure. She's kind of like the conscience of the story, the moral fulcrum or center of the story in a way. She's the bone of contention often for him, for my character, and for my sister, Sarah, played by Laura Linney. He just snaps at one point and it all comes out. And they both say, the father and son, things that they probably regret later having said to each other. It's awful. But
that's, watching this movie, it's like watching, everybody's had that Thanksgiving dinner where there's a family member that's just off their rocker and you don't know what to do or say. But this is like this family as portrayed in this film. It's like one awful Thanksgiving dinner after another. It's in whatever relationship, whatever day that your father, the character in the film, wakes up, he's just got a new bone of contention that he is just angry at the world, angry at you, angry at, as you said, his wife left him so many years ago. And we've all known people that can't get over this stuff in their lives, and their lives are ruined by it because they decide to let that take over. But probably at his core, Willis, your father in this movie, at his core, he was probably wrecked by his parents. Yeah. They were probably wrecked by their parents. Right. It's like, how do you, and you or your character, you're trying to break the cycle here. Yeah. Well, you don't want to be your father's son. No. And yet you love him because he's your dad.
But you see a lot, one of the ways that the story is put together, it's kind of a complex structure. There's a lot of, you go back in time from distant past and more recent past. And what happens there is that you, not by way of excusing anything, you get hints as you go along. It's the kind of stories, I basically made the kind of movie I'd like to go see, where you get a few pieces of the puzzle. Good idea. As a spectator, you get a few pieces of the puzzle, and start to put it together. And then another scene, and then you see something from the past. Oh, another few pieces of the puzzle about the dynamic of this family and about the individuals and why are they the way they are? And why do they relate to each other the way they do? And with Willis, you see, even in the happier days, from the early 60s, the mid 60s, late 60s, it's a gradual progression, but there was always something there for him, which may or may not have to do with his upbringing. It just may be the way he is to some degree. Yeah. But it's probably has, there's some hints at that it's from how his father treated him. Not to excuse it, but you see that he's a person who's not comfortable with change. In other words, in his relationship with his wife, the mother figure, Gwen, and with others, when they, like if I have a friend who says to me, hey, guess what I just learned? Or I have this new skill, or I saw this movie, or would you like to read this book? It's a great book. And you go, oh, that's nice. Thanks. Something new. I can learn something. Willis is the kind of person that you say, hey, I have a new interest. His wife says, I'm going to go take art classes down in Utica, New York. It's a bit of a drive. Can I borrow the truck? And instead of thinking, oh, that's cool, you're going to learn how to paint. He's like, it's a threat. Anything that's a change, any evolution of the people around in the lives of the people around him, right? Not to mention changing times, the 1960s, 70s, whatever in society. It's like, what the hell? it's, it's all against me. Anything. I mean, this was the Trump mentality.
Right.
Anything you don't understand, it's a threat. It must be put down immediately. Shoot first, ask questions later. That's the kind of guy Willis is. And he always was, even in the gentlest of times. There's a scene that happens in 1968 in the story, and it's my character's 10th birthday. And he's very proud. He's standing there, and there's other kids that are invited, and there's the mother comes in with a cake, Gwen does, and there's the moms of the other kids there. And Willis is standing by the doorway of the kitchen. He's smoking a cigarette, and he's so proud. He's beaming. He's so happy. Everybody's happy. And then his wife said, she's cutting up the cake after the candles are blown out. And she says, "Hey, honey, can you put your cigarette down for a second? Just give me a hand, like help me with the passing out the cake or something, like participate, normal, right?" Yeah. And he says, "Why?" And she's like, "Uh-oh." It's like, you can tell. It's like, you don't have to show scenes like that before. You get from the way she reacts that this is not the first time. And she says, right. Never mind. Like, I can do it. And he says, and then he says, "What?" He provokes it. It's like,
yeah, he won't let it go. Yeah,
he won't let it go. And she says, "Never mind, we're fine." And he says, "Oh, now I can't relax and have a smoke in my own home. It's my house." It's like and then he goes, "Fuck this," and walks out. And it's like, holy shit. The thing is that he, till the end of his life, will probably be convinced that she ruined that birthday party.
Right.
Whereas everybody in the room, and probably most of the audience watching that scene on screen, knows that he did it. But why did he do it? It's because he can't handle new information. Yeah. It confuses him. It scares him. And so where does most violence and bullying come from? It comes from fear, and fear of being ignorant, fear of losing control. And this is a guy, and to some degree typical of his generation, Willis, guys who were born during or just after the Great Depression, and grew up through World War II, and at a time where boys were taught that you don't cry because that's weak. Right. You don't show emotions, that's weak. And you need to seem in control no matter what situation you're in, especially around women, and especially when you grow up to be a father in a nuclear heterosexual, family household. You're the boss. People adapt to you. You don't adapt to them. And you're the final word. You're the king at the table, and you're king of the household. And that's the way men were brought up. And even very nice guys who are nice fathers had that sort of mentality. But he has it to an extreme where the control thing is a problem for him. So he can't, it doesn't compute. So if you're doing something I didn't expect that you didn't do yesterday, right, or you're talking in a different way, or you're reading a book, why are you reading a book? Am I not interesting enough? You know what I mean? That kind of attitude.
Right. I think most people listening to this know this guy. Somewhere you've encountered this guy, somewhere in your life, maybe not in your family, but you've worked next to him. It's so, and I have to say, this film is so beautifully put together. You mentioned the editing process here, but it's so great. If every filmmaker had as their ethos what you just said, that you wanted to make the film you wanted to see, I'd like to make a film like that. Because I think people listen to this, I'd like to watch a film that you'd like to see. If you said to me, "Hey, Mike, I saw this great film, you should see this," but you decided in making the film that that's the film you were going to make, and as a result, the whole story is not unloaded on us in the first 10 minutes, so everything is explained. It is, layers are peeled off. You go back and forth in time. Things are not revealed until later in the film. You don't know which way this story's going. You don't know, and isn't that always what makes a great story in many ways, is the thrill of that surprise as the story unfolds. If you can figure out what's going to happen 10 minutes from now in the movie, you're watching a boring movie.
Or life. I mean, life is that way,
Life is that way. You and I do not know what the rest of our day is going to be like. And if it's one of my days, it could not, it could go south quickly.